hijab. I feel like it's one of those things, it sparks endless debate, but how often do we really get beyond the headlines?
Right.
Today we are taking you on a deep dive into the heart of the matter with Dr. Abla Hasan's Decoding the Egalitarianism of the Qur'an.
Oh, it's so good.
Get ready for some serious aha moments as we uncover surprising truths about this often misunderstood practice.
It's about to get interesting. Dr. Hasan does not shy away from challenging our assumptions.
No.
And she does it all by going straight to the source, the Qur'an.
And that's what I love about this book. She doesn't just tell us what to think. She gives us the tools to understand the Qur'an's message on our own.
Exactly. Take the whole concept of modesty, for example.
Okay.
We often hear it in relation to women in hijab.
Right.
But Dr. Hasan flips the script.
She does.
She says modesty, as described in the Qur'an, is for everyone.
Right, for everyone. It's not just women. It's about
everyone.
How we treat each other, the respect we show, and how we carry ourselves in the world.
Right. It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in creating a respectful and dignified society.
Yeah.
And that's something that resonates across different faiths and cultures.
Totally.
Think about it. The golden rule, treat others how you want to be treated. That has echoes of the same value.
That's a really interesting point because you're right. It's not this foreign concept. It's about tapping into those shared values of decency and respect that are already present in our societies. So when we approach hijab from that broader understanding of modesty, it takes on a whole new meaning.
Right.
It's not just about women's clothing. It's about something much bigger.
Exactly. And this is where Dr. Hasan really starts dismantling those common misconceptions about hijab.
Okay.
Like, have you ever heard the argument that it's all about preventing women from tempting men?
Oh, absolutely. That's like one of those arguments you hear all the time.
It is a common one.
Yeah.
Dr. Hasan shuts that down completely. She points out that this interpretation completely twists the Qur'an's message of mutual respect and shared responsibility.
It's like saying that only one gender is responsible for controlling their behavior, which just doesn't make sense when you think about it.
It really doesn't.
And then there's the whole historical argument.
Right.
That hijab was used to distinguish free women from slaves.
Another misconception Dr. Hasan tackles head-on. She argues that this interpretation lacks any real Quranic basis, and frankly, it completely contradicts the message of equality within Islam.
It's almost like people impose their own assumptions onto the practice without really understanding the historical and religious context.
Exactly. And speaking of assumptions, let's talk about the misconception that hijab requires women to cover their faces.
Yeah, this is another one you hear a lot.
All the time.
But Dr. Hasan sets the record straight on that too. She points out that the Quran itself never mandates face covering as part of hijab.
It's a really important distinction because it highlights how cultural practices have sometimes been confused with actual religious requirements.
Totally. And this is where things get really fascinating.
Yeah.
Dr. Hasan dives deep into a specific verse.
Okay.
Verse 33.59, which uses the word أ.د. Now, أ.د. translates to minor harm.
Right.
And it's been misinterpreted to mean that hijab is about protecting women from sexual assault.
And you can see how people might come to that conclusion.
Right.
But Dr. Hasan argues that this interpretation misses the nuances of the word أ.د. in this context.
So if it's not about preventing that kind of serious harm, what is it about?
Well, Dr. Hasan suggests that in this verse, أ.د. is more about those everyday social misunderstandings or unwanted attention that can make someone uncomfortable.
Right.
Think about those times you're out and about and get unwanted attention. It can really ruin your day.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like you're just trying to live your life.
Exactly. And Dr. Hasan argues that hijab can help women minimize those situations and create a space for more positive and purposeful interactions.
It's about setting boundaries.
Yes.
And communicating your intentions clearly. I love that. So it's not about hiding away. It's about moving through the world with confidence and agency.
Exactly. It's about taking control of your own narrative. And this leads us to one of Dr. Hasan's boldest arguments. She suggests that hijab can actually be a tool for liberation from the male gaze.
Okay, hold on. Hijab is liberation. That's going to turn some heads.
Yeah, it's definitely a thought-provoking argument. You see, Dr. Hasan, she challenges us to question why men's typically more covered attire is rarely seen as hindering their freedom,
right,
while women's choices about modesty are often met with skepticism.
Right. It's like the default for men is already leaning towards modesty, but for women, it's seen as this big state.
It is, absolutely. She points out that in many societies, women are bombarded with messages telling them to prioritize their physical appearance above all else.
Oh, 100%. Think about all the images we see in advertising, movies, even on social media.
Yeah.
It's all about achieving that perfect body and looking eternally youthful.
Exactly. And Dr. Hasan argues that hijab can be a way for women to opt out of that system. It's about saying, my worth isn't tied to how well I conform to these impossible beauty standards.
It's about reclaiming your power in a world that's constantly trying to tell you how to look and what to wear.
Yes.
Now, I know some people might argue that by covering up, women are somehow making themselves invisible.
Right.
But Dr. Hasan addresses that too, right?
She does, and she makes a really interesting point. She says, true hijab is about shifting the focus from outward appearance to those internal qualities that truly define us. Our intelligence, our kindness, our contributions to the world.
So it's not about erasing your individuality or hiding your femininity.
Right.
It's about expressing it on your own terms.
Exactly. And that idea that true liberation comes from within really resonates with people from all walks of life, whether they choose to wear hijab or not.
It's about challenging those societal norms that tell us we have to look a certain way to be valued and respected.
Right.
But Dr. Hasan doesn't stop there.
She doesn't.
She also tackles the argument that if hijab is about modesty, shouldn't it apply to men too?
She tackles this head on.
Okay.
She points out that men already dress modestly in many societies. They cover their bodies.
Right.
They generally don't wear revealing clothing, but
it's never seen as a restriction on their freedom or a threat to their masculinity.
Right.
It's just normal.
Exactly. And she uses this observation to highlight the double standard women face.
Right.
She asks us to consider why it's so often seen as radical or oppressive when women choose to do the same.
It's such a simple question, but it really makes you think. Especially when you consider how much emphasis is placed on women's bodies in the media and advertising.
It is. And this is something Dr. Hasan delves into as well.
Okay.
She talks about how this constant objectification can be harmful to women, contributing to body image issues, low self-esteem, even violence.
Wow.
She argues that hijab can be a way for women to push back against those harmful messages and reclaim their bodies and their narratives.
It's like saying, I'm not here to be judged solely on my appearance. I'm here for my mind, my heart, my contributions to the world.
Precisely. It's a powerful statement about self-worth and self-determination.
It is.
And remember how we were talking earlier about how Dr. Hasan emphasizes the importance of choice when it comes to hijab?
Right. For it to have any meaning, it has to be a free and independent choice.
Exactly. She connects this back to a fundamental principle in Islam. There is no compulsion in religion,
right?
Meaning genuine faith cannot be forced.
So for a woman who chooses to wear hijab, it's an outward expression of an internal commitment to her faith.
Exactly. And that brings us to another fascinating point Dr. Hasan makes. She says that for many Muslim women, hijab is about much more than just following rules. It's about seeking a deeper connection with God.
It's about that personal relationship with the divine.
Yes. And she challenges the misconception that women who wear hijab are somehow more pious or closer to God than those who don't.
It's that whole judging a book by its cover thing, right?
Yes.
Outward appearances don't tell the whole story.
Precisely. Dr. Hasan reminds us that everyone's journey of faith is unique, and we shouldn't make assumptions about someone's piety based solely on their clothing.
It's about respecting each other's choices and acknowledging the diversity of thought and practice within Islam. Now, something that really struck me about Dr. Hasan's analysis is how she connects hijab to this idea of inner transformation.
That's such an important point. She argues that it's not just about covering your hair, it's about cultivating a sense of modesty and humility that extends to all aspects of your life, your thoughts, your words, your actions.
It's about striving to embody those values in everything you do.
Exactly. And she argues that this inner transformation, this journey of self-improvement, is an ongoing process.
It's not a destination, it's a journey.
Exactly. And that resonated with me.
Yeah.
She's basically saying that true liberation comes from within. It comes from freeing yourself from the need for external validation, from those constant pressures to conform.
It's about defining your own worth. And that's something we can all aspire to. It's about finding that inner peace and freedom that comes from living in alignment with your values.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message for everyone, regardless of their background or belief.
It really is. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the history of hijab, the social and cultural context, the spiritual dimension, and even the psychological aspects.
It's been quite the depth dive. And I think what's so important about Dr. Hasan's work is that she encourages us to move beyond those stereotypes and assumptions we often encounter.
She's all about looking at this topic with fresh eyes and appreciating the many different experiences and perspectives within the Muslim community.
And she challenges us to confront our own biases, not just about hijab, but about modesty, agency, and what it means to be a woman in the world today.
You know, it makes you realize how much our own cultural conditioning shapes the way we see things.
Right.
So much of this comes down to unpacking those ingrained beliefs.
Absolutely. It's about questioning those assumptions we often take for granted. And that's what makes this conversation so important.
It's about opening our minds to different ways of seeing the world.
Yes.
And Dr. Hasan doesn't let us off the hook with easy answers.
She doesn't.
She leaves us with this really thought-provoking question at the end of the chapter.
Okay.
She asks, if modesty is considered the norm for men in many societies, why is it often seen as so restrictive or unusual for women?
It stops you in your tracks, doesn't it? It's like she's shining a light on that double standard and asking us to really examine why women's choices, particularly when it comes to their bodies and appearance, are subject to so much more scrutiny.
It's like there's this underlying assumption that if a woman chooses to dress modestly, she must be oppressed or controlled, while a man who does the same is just, well, normal.
Exactly. And that's precisely the kind of thinking Dr. Hasan wants us to challenge.
Yeah.
She's encouraging us to broaden our perspectives and recognize the complexity of these issues. There's no one-size-fits-all answer, and that's okay.
It's about embracing nuance and understanding that modesty, agency, and empowerment can take many different forms.
It's about respecting individual choices and recognizing that true liberation comes from within.
And, you know, that's what makes this deep dive so incredibly valuable. It's not about dictating answers, but about inspiring deeper reflection and encouraging us to think critically about these really complex issues.
It's about fostering empathy, understanding, and a more inclusive dialogue around these important topics.
Exactly. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
Dr. Hasan argues that hijab can be a form of resistance, a way of pushing back against societal pressures and reclaiming one's own narrative. So here's something to ponder. Could embracing modesty in whatever way resonates with you be a radical act in today's world? A way to challenge those expectations and live more authentically?
It's a powerful question, and one that I think each of us has to answer for ourselves. But one thing's for sure. It challenges us to redefine what it means to be liberated, to be empowered, and to live a life that feels truly aligned with who we are.
It's about recognizing that true freedom comes from within, from aligning your actions with your values, and from challenging any system that seeks to limit or define you.
Yes.
And on that note, we encourage you to continue this conversation, to seek out diverse perspectives, and to always keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deeper.